welcome to another Sci-Fi Fantasy Saturday. Why am I saying Sci-Fi Saturday? And I've got a blank box here because I think I know what's in this box. I recently, as you can probably tell right there, I recently did pick this up at a local auction at my friendly local gaming store. Again, support your friendly local gaming stores. And opened this up and did a piece on that, so you can check out that video in my playlist. And really like this game. I generally like David Thompson games. I really like DVG games and their solo focus. You know, not all DVG games are solo, but you know, they kind of are the king of solo. They do the vast majority of their games focus on, you know, solo play and especially for wargamers. So I really do appreciate that. This series, For What Remains, had three standalone games in the series or the set. Each one of them introduced two new factions, and they were compatible. You can, you know, play against a mix and match of the factions as you play. But I really like this, did a piece on this, and reached out to DVG, who I've had some communications with over time, and they've sent me some stuff over time. I really do appreciate that. They're not like I don't have like any standard supporters or anything, but if they're probably the closest thing I have to a publisher that, you know, kind of believes in some of the stuff I'm doing here. So I do appreciate that very much. So I reached out to them and said, hey, this series seems to kind of died off or is not getting much attention. Do you have any review copies? I'll try to get it some more attention, you know, with my meager, you know, 570-ish subscribers. So they sent me this box here, and lo and behold, let's see what's get inside here. So you can see right there, DVG, Dan Verssen Games, very, very good people there. And what do we have in here? I open it up just to see that. Out of the Basement. So there's another faction out there, which I think Blood on the Rails. And I don't know if that's coming or not, but if it is, awesome. If it's not, then I might just end up picking up because I am a completionist, right? But this is Out of the Basement, so let's pull this out and get into this one. And then I also got a little surprise in here of Corsair Leader t-shirt, and it's 4X, so they know my size. Actually, I'm not that big, but I usually do get t-shirts a little bit bigger because they have a tendency to shrink, and I like them feeling roomy instead of tight. But that's awesome. I got me a t-shirt as well, and if it is too big for me, my son, who is much bigger than I am, he has a birthday coming up, and that might be one of his presents. So thank you very much, DVG. So here's what we have. Here is Out of the Basement. As I said, you know, you have Streets of Ruin, and this gives the two factions in here are the humans, or there's the kind of the basic humans, the unaltered humans that they're fighting for freedom, and their primary antagonist in here is the government factions. God, I can't remember the name now, but we'll get it to when we get in here. That are basically controlling. They're the leftover vestiges of the governments of the world, and they're kind of cyborgs. They're all mechanically and technologically altered, and so they're kind of controlling or trying to add some semblance of control in government to what's left over, what remains from this storyline. And one of the things that really caused all this was this kind of kind of similar to Stranger Things, the Upside Down world. You have this parallel dimension or other dimension where these they call it Out of the Basement, or the basement, where these supernatural creatures have been. There's a gateway that was unlocked by some nuclear test, and unlocked a gate to that dimension, and these guys have come out. So they're really the biggest antagonist that really kind of ended, you know, that started all the chaos and nuclear war, and why we're in kind of a post-apocalyptic environment for what remains. And this is part of the remains. So they're still out there. They're kind of the big baddies. And the government section in here are the ones that are controlling it. They're fighting against mainly the government, but they're just really fighting for the freedom. The humans are. And here you have again, the big baddies that kind of started it all off, and then they're also the genetically altered race of Earthen, I think is what they're called, that they're kind of they were kind of created as a super warrior to go up against the abasement and they creatures, and they basically kind of help beat them back. But then they realized that they were just kind of, I guess, being treated as slaves and just being thrown to the fodder. So they kind of revolted as well. So you get those two factions in here. And then in the one set I don't have, which is, I think, Blood on the Rails, that one is basically are kind of humans again, but there's one set of humans that have psychic powers, and so they're kind of altered humans that were part of a study, and their abilities are psychic or mental, and they have special abilities along along those lines. And the other set of the human force is kind of an ultra religious or zealot type force that don't believe in technology at all, and they actually can control animals. They kind of have I think there's like a beast lord type character in there that they can control. As I said, animals or beasts or stuff like that. So those are the two factions that I don't have, and they're in the other set. But it's good having this guy because this was the impetus for why we're at where we're at now in this world, because they're the big baddies here. So let's get inside the box. And I did a pretty long overview in the Streets of Ruin as I did that unboxing. So you might want to, I didn't do a very good job there. You might want to look at that and see what, I go into a little bit more of how the game plays and stuff. I don't know if I'm going to do that full thing on this. So there's a lot of other how to plays out there and videos on this. Gimpy did a whole, Gimpy Gamer, excellent source. He did a whole series on this and kind of laid it out. And I think they did some live plays actually as well. So let's get this straightened down a little bit here. So good solid box, good solid DVG box to hold your contents. It has this little spacer insert here, which holds the cards, which are a key to the game, and probably holds the dice. This is basically a D10 dice system for combat. You get a bag because this is a chit pull system, and it's an innovative chit pull system because not only are you pulling chits for actions, but you get to decide what chits go in. So you're further refining what forces you want to see come out, and then they're going to come out randomly out of the bag. So here's the rule book, and each of the rule books kind of feature a character that's in the set, but I think the rules are generally the same. I think. So you've got some of the, that's it's kind of like a necromancer kind of thing, but that's one of the basement characters, and this is one of the earthen characters. Looks like he's got a mask there, so he's ready for COVID. So you got the rule book is color. The game is not that complicated. It's a skirmish game. It's actually almost an adaptation of a miniatures game, except that you're using counters, and there's a reason why you kind of need to use counters instead of miniatures in this, and I'll kind of go into that. But rules are relatively straightforward. There's layout examples. There's some background information. Here's the factions. The Combine is the government faction. The Freeman Coalition, which are the humans. The Combine, which is the government that rules over what's left. The Echo are this psychic humans. The Soldiers of Light is that ones that are kind of zealous, that don't believe in technology anymore. The Earthen are the kind of the created, biologically developed fighters against the Order of the New Dawn, and these are the people that are out of the basement. So it's called the Order of the New Dawn, which are the big baddies, which are in this box, and they're just lovely there, aren't they? So you talk about the characters, and so the reason why you need to have counters is that the characters kind of have levels. They're either elite, veteran, or recruit, and when they take a hit, you flip over. Let's say you have an elite, you flip over his elite counter. If he takes another hit, then now he's just a veteran, so he's going to have these abilities. His abilities are going to go down. If that veteran takes a couple of hits, then it's going to be a recruit, and will have these abilities, and once the recruit takes a couple of hits, well, you're done. I mean, so you basically have elite will have 6 steps and a recruit will have 2 steps. So that's of taking hits. You have then their movement might change over time. That's how many spaces they can move. It's a grid. It's not a hex space, but just a grid. You have your weapon range. Again, there's line of sight rules, and there's really not a lot of different terrains. There's some blocking terrain. There's some difficult terrain that affects movement, and there's some water terrain that affects movement, but there's not a lot of terrain and line of sight type issues. So again, relatively straightforward and easy to get into. You have your close combat. So if you're right next to somebody, this is how many dice you roll. And again, you get hits based on if you exceed the other side's defense. So if I wanted to hit this guy, I have to roll a 6 or greater to hit that person. And this is how many dice you get to roll for close combat, then for range combat. Again, up to its weapons range, and then you have your defense. So relatively straightforward there. There's some complexity that gets into each of these characters might have special features. Like this one here, this Death Vine has Camouflage, Constrict, and Hydromage, and then it still has those at a veteran, but then once it drops down to recruit, or if you just picked a recruit out of the bag, it will just have these two abilities. And there's a chart on that. There's some complexity there because you got to look at all the charts and figure out what all the special abilities are. But I mean, that's not too much there. Again, I mean, nothing more than what you would deal with like in a miniatures game of some similar ilk. Here's your action token. So, this is what you decide to put in the bag. You're going to put in, you're going to get as many action tokens as there are characters on the board. So if you have 4 different characters on the board, then you're going to get be able to put 4 action tokens. There's like 3 action tokens of each character, but you don't have to put like one of each. You can put like all 3 of one, and then maybe 1 of another. And if you have like 4, if you're putting 4 action tokens in, and that means that when you put 3 in, you got a much better chance of that person doing their actions, and you might want them to do 1-2 actions, before anybody else. But you're not going to be getting any actions or very limited actions for like the 1 token that you put in, because that's your percentage chances of what you're drawing out of the bag. And the other side gets the same thing. It changes up a little bit different on solo play, and I'll talk about that. That's another thing. Again, this is DVG, guys, so this is a multiplayer game and plays very well multiplayer, but they do have a very, what I kind of think is an innovative and good solo system that just doesn't tell you, well, this is what the side does. There's a solo system for each character on the side. So you're going to roll for each character, and that character is going to do something different based on the role and the mission and their motivation based on that mission or the objective. So I really do like that aspect of it. But I mean, the fact that it's a chit pull is already means that it's kind of solo friendly. Chit pull games, I find, are easier to play solo because you're not having to figure out, well, who am I going to move? Well, I pull out a thing, I'm going to do that person. Then you can figure out what does that person need to do. And sometimes you can play a chip pull game, to the best of your ability and not have a solo system because, it kind of makes sense of what they should be doing at that moment. But here you actually have a dedicated solo bot that sets things up for you or lays things out for you. Here's your setup. And there's going to be a mission book, and each mission is going to have its own setup that you will follow in victory conditions and the like. And you can just play a general skirmish game. I mean, you can just mix and match the different factions and just play your own kind of skirmish game and, set it to a number of points or set whatever missions you want to have on it. But there are scenario books. Now, the scenario books it's almost like a campaign. You can kind of advance characters. There's a leveling component to this, and you can kind of take your characters through the whole campaign or just play through the book. But the book is set for the factions that are in the box. So like this one will have a campaign book for these 2 factions. Streets of Ruin had a campaign book for those 2 factions, and then the third one will have, of course, a campaign book for it. You've got examples of play here and area attacks. There's some oversized units, and so they move a little bit different. Terrain doesn't necessarily block them. They kind of jump over big hexes and stuff. But they can also get hit easier because there's more areas that you can see them from the line of sight or hit them. Gameplay movement, it's pretty straightforward. You can move diagonal in this game. Gameplay abilities, Huge characters are some of the rules I was telling you about. Huge characters, and they move a little bit differently. Campaigns, and you can advance characters. Now, I do have a question a little bit about the campaigns, because each of the campaigns, each of the missions kind of have a build-out score. So you can just build whatever characters you want. So if you're advancing in a campaign, and if you're going to have less than what that build-out score is, then I don't know if you'd really want to follow that. But anyway, that's something else. Here's the campaign book, and I'll get to that in a second. And here's the rules on solitaire play. So really, there's only 22 pages of rules, and with a lot of huge color examples, big text. So, I mean, this is not a complicated game, and pretty easy to get into. If you've played any miniatures games or tactical war games, this is a piece of cake. So there's some solitaire rules there. Then you get, starting on page 28, this is the history. This is the lore and timeline of what happened. And David Thompson's been, kind of worked on this, and the other, I don't know if his other developers worked on this, but I think this is his brainchild. This is what happened. This is the universe how we got to today. And I was talking about, these things that came out of the basement, these, what is it, the Order of the New Dawn or whatever. They're the really big baddies that the whole world tried to turn their attention to. And was started by some nuclear tests, and then other people started, well, I want to get access to this world and get their technology and stuff they have there, and so they started doing their own test, and it became a mess. So, and that is the layout, and here's how he developed it, and some of the kind of the designer notes. So that's the rule book. Again, very accessible, very easy to get into. Then you're going to have these, which are books for each of the factions. Here's the order, the big baddies, and it talks about each of the characters, and a little bit about, so this is the skills they're going to have at recruit, veteran, elite, and then this one is just veteran and elite that will have these skills here. So you got all the different characters there for the faction. They have quite a few. I think they might actually have more than some of the other factions. The regular humans, I don't think really had that many. I think they had like 4 or so. You have the Earthen. These are the creatures that were created to combat, specifically created to combat the Order. And so there's your terrains: clear, difficult, water terrain. So the Geomancer maybe does something with terrain, or can move through different types of terrain, different. So very interesting characters, very rich backstory here. Then here's your campaign. This is out of the basement. So this is the campaign. It gives you a little introduction there. And then you're going to have your scenario. So this is like the initial scenario. There's your skirmish points, or the build-out points. Here's how you do your setup with the characters. And then you have a solitaire, how it's set up. And again, I'll show you the cards and show you a little bit about the cards and how that works out on solitaire play. Then you have so you build up your scenarios, and then you get the last stand, and that has 30 skirmish points there. So that's a big one. Then you're going to have caution target box. So this is a new special ability. This is like a template. There's some templates in these games that the other one has like blast templates, because they have weapons that have area effect. This one looks like it has a little bit different area effect. Then you're going to have these are the tiles, the terrain tiles. So it's kind of geomorphic. You can put these, and they're double-sided. You can put these any way you want to kind of put those out there. So it gives you a lot of different options. Plus, with the ones you get in the other sets, I mean, you can really build kind of your own maps however you want. I mean, there's one set up in the scenario book, but then there's also you have a lot of replayability in how you want to put these together. The one thing I will say about them, they're thin. I mean, the thin actually helps out, because you can put them under plexiglass to kind of keep these set in place. But and since they're thinner, they're not going to sometimes the thick ones kind of warp a little bit. But we're kind of used to kind of mounted or a little bit bigger maps or thicker boards when we're dealing with these kind of games. And a thicker board might have been, kind of nice to have them set up. But again, there's probably a cost issue there. And again, these are very functional in how they lay out. You got some really cool colors there. So anyway, lots of different types of terrain. that you can build out your scenarios with. Then you have your counters. Here are the earthen, and so there's like some special abilities here, but then these are their action tokens. So you might have different, same character but different symbols on that, because you could have multiple characters of the same class, in play. Here's some of the oversized units, and again, good DVG quality here. Thick counters, pre-rounded, very nice. Very, very good counters. Again, this game kind of screams of a miniatures game, and you love to have the big chunky plastic to put on this board. But I don't know how they would do it with that leveling or the step loss system of how you flip over counters and remove counters. But plus that would add tremendously to the cost here. This is something like if this was like a Kickstarter thing, this would have been, $200 or more with tons of plastic. Here's some of the order, and have some oversized counters and stuff. So, I mean, each of these, it's very asymmetrical. Each of these characters play very differently. They have different abilities, so you have a lot of choices there on what characters you play. And then there's choices within the characters, how you use your ability, when you use your ability. And then, of course, you have all the decisions of the normal tactical decisions, trying to move around, what's your objective for this mission, and how do you get there, and how do you stay, out of range or out of sight or out of line of sight, and how do you use your abilities, whether it's close combat or range combat, how do you use that to the best of your ability. All your normal tactical decisions are here, and then you'll layer on top of it all the different choices that you have with the different characters and their abilities, and then you lay on top of that, this action system where you decide what you put in the bag. So you're kind of deciding, I need to get this guy in close up, so I need to put more of him in there because I want him to move more and to get into attack more, to use his abilities. And so you're making all kinds of decisions there. So there's layers and layers of decisions on a relatively simple rule set, which I find very, very good, very, very rewarding, and very interesting. This might go with a Geomancer, maybe. I don't know that. I was looking in that book. Looks like they do something with terrain or something. Geomancer, that would kind of fit with its name, right? Oh, we got another insert thing there, and this was inspected by 107. I think that's who inspected my last game. Maybe they only have 107. Maybe there is just 107, and that's their numbers. It's like it was going to be 007, but they got a promotion. All right, so here's the abilities reference I was telling you about. So this is all the order's abilities. So this is where some complexity kind of gets in the game. You got to kind of look at this chart and figure out, oh, that person has this ability. What does it do? And how do I want to use that? So there's all the order's abilities. Here's all the earthen's abilities. And some of these get into quite a bit of text here. So I was like, oh, how do I do this shockwave thing here? Then here's the AI act. Oh, and then let's do this real quick. This is your force roster, and these are good stock, good player aid type stock. This is something you might want to copy, and you can keep track of your advancement of a character over time. So that's more like the campaign mode or kind of a role-playing kind of mode of it. Then this is the AI activation. So this is the different things they can do. If they're engaged, they do these things. If they're injured, they do these things. And then this is their orders. It kind of explains all that for the earthen and for the order. And this is unique, what they do, or how they do. Each one of these, you can tell they do different things. So this is kind of unique to what their AI works. That's the general aspects. Let's get to the cards, which is the kind of the meat of this. So when you get to these cards here, this is really what's going to play out the AI so like this Deathvine. For Deathvine characters, well, you'll roll for each one. If you have 2 on the board, you roll a die, and then if it's engaged, it's going to do one of these things right here, right? If it's engaged, you roll a 1, it's going to withdraw and move to the closest Geomancer, right? So, and that explains up here, engaged. It talks about what are some of the things it might do that are here, like this, the constrict. If you roll 2 to 5, it's going to constrict the highest value enemy. And this explains what constriction means. Use constriction against the highest value enemy with a weapon range and line of sight. So this kind of tells you, this gives you a little bit more detail. Then, of course, you can always look in the book and get even more detail, but this gives you a handy reference on what that does. But this is the AI, right? This is you're playing solo. So if it's engaged, you roll a dice, it does that. If it's injured, you roll a dice, it does that. Otherwise, it does these orders, that if it's not engaged or injured, then you do the orders. And 1 through 4 is objective. So whatever that specific objective of that mission is, this unit will do that. Otherwise, it's going to scavenge or it's going to assault and constrict, okay? So that's the death vine. The Geomancer does something totally different, right? This one heals if it's injured. This one does heals here if it's engaged. It does different orders, right? So each one of these characters has their own AI card, and so it's going to do something different. So not only do you have the overall kind of what that faction is going to do, but it's built into the detailed tactical level of each character is going to do a different thing. And if you have 2 Hellborns, well, I mean, you're going to roll dice for each one. It's going to do, each one of those might do something different based on what you roll on its AI card. So that's the kind of the neat thing about this is it kind of goes into that level of detail. And here's the AI cards for the order. So each one has their own AI card or solo play card, and so they're doing something different. So again, you can sit there and play this game to the best of your ability. I think Marco Omnigamer, I think he says he still, even though they have this system, he likes playing this game to the best of its ability in each side, making the decisions whenever whatever action shit he pulls out. But this is a decent solo system. I mean, it really does. I mean, you still might end up in a situation where, God, that doesn't make sense. And I think there might be something in the rules that say you can still override that if it completely doesn't make sense, right? But, or you might say, yeah, I'm going to let that go because, the AI is being stupid today and that's going to help me out. But it really depends on kind of guess what mood you're in. But generally it works. I mean, generally these things make sense and they're moving in the right direction. And this is not that different from, I mean, Lock and Load has several AI systems for their Lock and Load Tactical and for their World at War series, World of War 85 and the White Star series, the World War II series. They have their own cards that are a little bit more involved in this. But I think this is this is a simpler game. But I think this is a very nice, concise, AI type system. And then, of course, you have all the different cards for each of the characters that I told you about that tells you what their skills are, what their abilities are at each level, and the like. So, again, I mean, you could probably do a miniatures game and just use these cards and then just, keep track of hits, maybe on the card or something of that, how many hits it can take over time. But anyway, and there's the rest. Here's some more of there's Abomination. That looks pretty nasty there. So there's all the different characters and cards. That guy's still just, it's a Nethermancer. I thought it was like a Necromancer. Anyway, so that is what you get in a box of For What Remains Out of the Basement. So if you're wanting to get into this system, I think it's a good system. It's a good, solid skirmish system with a good, solid solo play. If you're wanting to get into this system, I think this might be kind of a must-have because it lays in the big baddie, of the order that you want to go against. So you definitely probably want to get this to deal with those guys. Or collect the whole set, right? Anyway, so that is what you get in a box of For What Remains Out of the Basement. There's a little bit of overview of how it plays. What do you guys and gals think about this? Do you like this game? Do you like this system? Does this interest you? Love to hear your comments. Love to hear what you think about it. Want to really thank DVG for letting me providing a copy of this. I want to get into this more. I want to do some more. I haven't really done much playthroughs, but I like to get into doing some recorded playthroughs and try to get, accentuate or show, how this game plays and some of the other DVG games as well that they've been gracious with me on. So anyway, that's what I got for today on my Saturday Sci-Fi Fantasy or Sci-Fi Fantasy Saturday. Well, I don't know. It may be something that we'll catch on there. Anyway, as always, hey, thanks for spending some time with me. Thanks for watching.